Hey folks, and welcome back to Glenn and Adrian's Rock Talk. That's Adrian.
And that's Glenn.
And today we're going to look at a new old band. The band is Luzbel. All right, they are from Mexico, and they had their heyday in the mid-'80s, 84 to 86, really. And we are going to look at something off their EP, Metal Caído del Cielo, from 1985. Okay, the song is called El Ángel de la Lujuria. Now, pardon me if I got that pronunciation wrong. I think it's probably pretty close, but you can correct me below. And of course, I'll have it written in our title so you can see what it should be. Okay, my notes on this. I'm told this was the very beginning of the band Luzbel, which is considered one of the most outstanding metal bands that Mexico has had, especially with the members during this stage, this first stage from 84 to 86. So it looked like fun to me. Adrian, do you have any experience with this band? Or
No.
That's not surprising. I haven't heard of them either. It's just the matter of a different culture, I think, different country. There was so much good metal going on back then. But, yeah, I'm very interested to check this out. So let's just dive right into it, and we'll talk about it afterwards. Sheep sound effects.
Yep.
Atravesar
So, okay, that was pretty cool. I have a lot of observations, but maybe I should let you start, Adrian. Is there anything to
Okay. Well, if you hadn't said 1985 before the song, I would have guessed that this was from the early 80s, because especially the beginning sounds a lot like stuff I used to hear on the radio back then. But then it gets heavier too. It introduces some elements of, say, I don't know, Metallica or Slayer, perhaps, or maybe not Slayer, but I mean,
maybe
Metallica.
though. Yeah. I had the same thought, especially during the solo section. They kind of veered off into another key for a moment, which is something that Slayer is famous for doing. Even around that time, this just coincides with the very beginning of the thrash movement. With the early Metallica, the early Slayer, and other bands around. Venom, perhaps, was part of that.
That also came to mind.
Yeah. I mean, definitely has that sound, like the early developing thrash, but it's happening in Mexico instead of wherever, New York, L.A., So that was cool. I noticed that there were some dual guitar leads in there. That's always welcome. The cover of that looked just like a Hieronymus Bosch painting, which is like you've got the bodies stacked up and there's just mayhem going on all around. And that was a very common thing back in the early 80s for the metal scene. Even Black Sabbath's Greatest Hits has a Hieronymus Bosch painting on it. Yeah, overall, I liked their sound a lot. It's also funny, you can tell it was probably recorded a little bit on the cheap. It fit perfectly in with like the first Slayer album, the first Metallica album, the first Megadeth album, when they're just getting a little money and getting onto a smaller label like Metal Blade or something like that from back then. Celtic Frost is another one,
Yeah, I was even thinking Judas Priest in the beginning.
Well, maybe. That could be. A
little bit.
And in terms of the actual recording quality and kind of aesthetic, St. Vitus even, perhaps. So, fits right in with everything else going on at that time. It makes me wonder what else was happening in Mexico as well as other parts of the world, because we were focused on what we could find in America at the time. This is, of course, pre-internet. And so the best we can do is to look at an album cover. Maybe we heard about it in one of those fanzines that were being made back then, like Maximum Exposure, that would show up in the record store. You could read reviews by people. These things used to get printed up a couple thousand at a time. They might get a little bit of distribution. There were a bunch of them like that, fanzines that the music stores would carry. That was about the only way you would know what was on these records, because they didn't tend to get mainstream coverage. So you wouldn't necessarily get a Slayer review for, say, Hell Awaits or something in your standard newspaper. You have to go to the fanzine. So that's kind of what we did. That's how I picked up on how we picked up on some hardcore and on the thrash back then. And kind of as the whole movement was changing, because it feels like about 82, 83, there was a sea change. And then by 85, there were a whole slew of new albums, and it was well underway by then. Just this whole other thing. And you're like, wow, these bands are like printing 1,000 at a time. Several of them are just printing them themselves, and then they sell them out of the back of their car or whatever, at the gigs. And probably the same for all those formative metal and thrash bands. It seems like that's probably exactly what this band was doing. Luzbel, again. And I hope I have their pronunciation right. That one I'm not so sure about, but it looks like Luzbel to me. Really cool stuff. Might have to check out a little bit more. Would like to know a little more about the scene in general in Mexico. What else was going on? Great suggestion. That came from Francisco. Thanks, Francisco. Okay, so with that, folks, why don't you let us know what you thought about this? And if you can put it in context with anything else you were listening to at the time, or since. I know a lot of people aren't old enough to have been buying the records in 85, but I'd like to hear from you too. If you have other suggestions for us, please leave those below. And if you enjoyed this video, please give us a like. If you enjoyed our presentation, please subscribe. All right. Thanks so much for your ongoing support, folks, and thanks for joining us on this. We will catch you on the next one. All right. Take care, folks.
See you all later.